Morning class, I'm Will Kemp from Will Kemp Art School, and this week we're going to be taking inspiration from objects that you might see every day and then transforming them into paint. So what we're going to be working on is this simple study of a fish. All we're going to be using is 5 paints and a couple of brushes. We're going to learn how you can combine a monochrome underpainting with colour glazes to create a luminosity in your acrylic paintings. I'll be using a Stay Wet palette to hold my tonal colour string mixes, and then any paint that you've got left over at the end you can just transfer back into the Stay Wet palette and then use it for future paintings. So with 2 brushes and 5 paints, how can we fail? You can download the reference image from my website to work along from, so grab a brew, maybe a couple of biscuits, and let's get painting. So to prepare the ground colour, I just used raw umber and titanium white to get this nice, just off of a light mid-tone. It's about the area for the centre of the reference image. And I've sketched that in with a 3B pencil and then a little fine line around the outside with an acrylic marker. And now I'm just swapping to some paint and I'm just going to wash in these darker areas. I've got a bit of water just off camera that I'm going to be dipping the brush into, and that will just change the dilution. And we're just going to start just to try and see those warm and dark tones and just get a tonal underlayer on this painting. So I'm not worried too much about all the little subtleties of colour that I can see in the fish scales and the surface. I'm more just trying to think, if I was going to be drawing this, how I would start to build it up. Which areas would be lighter, which areas would be darker. So there's this nice dark band along the centre here. So there I just dipped my brush into some glazing liquid. It can just help just to give that little bit of flow when you don't want it, you don't want it too thick at this stage. So I'm just swapping between the 2 mediums, either the water when I want it thin and translucent, or a bit of the glazing medium when I want a bit more flow to the paint, but I don't want to make that mix any more transparent. So I'm just swapping between the 2 mediums, either the water when I want it thin and translucent, or a bit of the glazing medium when I want a bit more flow to the paint, but I don't want to make that mix any more transparent. So any more transparent. So here I've just swapped to a size 10 square brush. This is a synthetic brush. Okay, that's great. Now what I can do is put out a range of tones that are just mixed with the raw umber and titanium white, just so I've got what's called a value string going from light to dark. So now I can just work my way down the value string, just as I'm judging these hues. I'm still, as you can see just from working this one tone, not introducing any of the blue yet. Just trying to see how far I can go just with the one pigment to start with. And it can be a really good way of tuning your eye in to what the actual subtleties of the colour are within the piece you're working on, and how much you can do with a change in tone or a change in texture that you apply to the paint, rather than immediately jump into a change in colour. Then you can just jump back up the colour string if you notice a tone gets slightly darker. Okay, so now we've got this nice underpainting blocked in, just tonally with the raw umber and the titanium white. We can start to add some of the blue hues, so these colours will really come out, and then we can add some more of this warm orange colour to the underside of the fish. So what I've put out here, this is a phthalo blue with a red shade to it. And this is a mix of 1:1 titanium white with the blue, just to show you how intense that blue is when you add white to it. It's got a lot higher tinting strength than if you use ultramarine blue, and it goes more towards turquoise. When you have the blue that's got a green shade, that goes even more towards turquoise. This is a bit in between the two. But it can be really nice for getting some of these shades in the cooler side of the fish. Just when we mix it with the raw umber, you add the two together, you get this really nice dark. And then what you can do is use your tones that you've already got pre-mixed to add into that. So you get a very close tone to what we're looking at. Use that 1:1 if you want to make it a little bit bluer. And it gives this lovely greeny blue hue. So when I first started mixing this and painted this on, it was going a bit too green. So I've added a bit of permanent alizarin crimson, and then when I add that to the green, it will take out the green and make it a bit more purpley. Starts to feel a bit more sympathetic to the colours. This is a raw sienna, and what's nice about raw sienna is it's got a really nice transparent quality to the pigment. So at this stage of the painting, when I can start to see these nice yellowy sheens that are on the surface of the fish, I can just wash my brush out quite well, so that I'm not going to pick up any of the previous pigment that was on there. And then what I can start to do is use the glazing liquid and a touch of the raw sienna. just start to glaze it over. So I'm just looking for the areas that have got this glow of yellow to start with. Again with the crimson, there's a nice crimson hue on this side. And then if that drops the value a bit too much, so it goes a bit too dark, I can just mix in some of that pre-mixed tone. And at the bottom, you can just combine the two together, so you have this muted orange. So this is where the glazing liquid is so important, because if you were trying to do this with water, it would just be running off of the board, especially when you're working at an easel. And again, because this is blue, is got a transparent nature to it as well, if you use it pretty thin, you can just add a little blue sheen. So there you have a really simple rendering of the fish by working up the underpainting just in one tone with the raw umber and then glazing over the top with these transparent pigments that really can bring colour into what initially you see is just quite a tonal subject matter.